Hello there, Llama here, and in this video we're going to really tackle the most important part of any Star Wars Battleground game that you get into. Much like they say breakfast is the most important meal of the day because it sets you up, your tech level 1 is the most important thing to get right because it's going to decide the game for you. It's going to determine what resources you have access to, how strong your economy is, and how fast you can tech up, as well as what units you can pump out to rush your opponent. So it's absolutely critical that we do our best to get this as close to streamlined and perfect as we can. Now in Age of Empires 2, the most popular use of the game engine that Battlegrounds is modelled off, their starting maps in general are fairly often consistent, and what makes them consistent is how much food is available in the starting area around the players. This, however, in Star Wars Battlegrounds is not the case. It's generated on a map by map basis, but there are consistent types that I'm going to cover in this later part of this video. Being comfortable with these fairly common archetypes is going to help you navigate the game chaos that's introduced. This is effectively why it's a bit naive to just provide you with a set build order that you can use every game. You're never going to have 7 boars in Age of Empires 2, but in GBG that could happen. And we also have sheep, well, nerfs, that can be placed inside the animal nursery to provide a permanent stream of food income. These different gather rates also lead into why we can't just have a one-fits-all build order. Additionally, tech levels are much more impactful in Battlegrounds than they are in Age of Empires 2 due to the strength and volatility of some of the game unit types. Another difference that we do have with Age of Empires 2 is that GBG feels a ton better on the fast game speed rather than normal. The flow of the game just feels so much better, but this with the added map generation randomness is going to make this feel a little bit overwhelming and hostile to the newer player. But this doesn't mean that you cannot learn quickly and help to rein in the chaos, so I'm going to introduce a few rules that we can utilise for every map that we will take a look at the food archetypes. First things first, tech level 1 is all about worker production and scouting for resources. We don't know what the map's got in store for us until we reveal it out of the shroud with our scout. We can't just eat some nerf and know that there's 2 Rontos just waiting for us, like you can in Age of Empires 2 with the boars. We need to always actively be thinking about where we're getting food, and if we have enough to A, maintain our worker production, and B, get to T2. When we make mistakes with this, and we get an idle command center, that effect is going to feel even more dramatic than in normal with fast game speed. So it's absolutely imperative that we keep our worker production going, and A helps with B. We want a good tech time. Going up the tech level is what opens up the game to more strategic and military options. Being behind with a slow tech time can mean life or death in GBG. Not having turrets or trooper tech to hold a rush, or not having access to anti-air turrets or mech destroyers when being harassed by an enemy T3 player can open yourself up to losing too many workers and being irreparably behind. We queue up our workers. We do this by hammering H, the command center hotkey, to select it, and instantly hammering A to queue up the 4 workers. Now, how many houses you want to build varies. I would recommend, as a newer player who's just getting into the swing of things, that you build 2 houses at the very start of the game, because when you need that second house, you might be busy luring or scouting out your food. The reason that I go for just 1 house at the start is because of 2 instances where that extra carbon provides a slight benefit. In maps with no food, when we have to farm from the get-go, we get an additional farm quicker, and in high nerf maps we get our second nursery a bit quicker. Now, with the houses built, we need to have identified some food, ideally with our scout, and plan out what we're going to eat to keep our worker production up. As a newer player, I'd strongly recommend eating one of the nerfs you find at the start to provide you with 200 food and queue up some additional workers, as it might take you longer to identify the T1 plan. With nerfs and huntable animals, we want to put our first 6 workers on here to maintain our worker production without too much food dropping. If you don't know what food dropping is, it's either clicking the workers manually on the command center to deposit, this again being much easier in Age of Empires 2 because your workers can stand effectively inside the town centre, or the easiest way in my opinion is to garrison the workers with G command, then press W in the command centre to send them back to work. So when you get the hang of it, grab the workers, G to click the command centre, select the CC, queue workers, press W to send them back to work. This is essential with lure starts, often to keep the worker production going. The hunters store up to 35 food each, so often take longer than a worker circle to deposit themselves. For maps that don't have lureable hunt and have berries as the closest and ideal choice, we need to place 8 workers here with a food processor to keep worker production going, as berries gather rate is a lot slower. After these first 6 workers on hunt, or 8 on berries, we put 4 workers onto carbon with a carbon processor. We want to build this ideally in the middle of a good, long line of carbon so that the workers can split out evenly. It's ideal to micro your workers and keep an eye on them, as they are more often than not the worst pathfinders of all time. And while there are 2 to 3 on the same tree,
They often bump, get stuck, and reduce your carbon efficiency dramatically. The trees in some positions can be difficult to click on too, so I recommend the small trees mod that you can find in the description below, uploaded by one of the Expanding Fronts devs, Tevius. This way you can properly keep your workers to one tree each and maintain both the health of your carbon line longer and keep the workers being as efficient as possible. The carbon that we gain from these 4 workers will fuel our prefab shelters and what we need to build up our rush infrastructure, 1 troop centre, 1 power core, 1 troop centre, or help us establish farms we need to maintain our food production. After these 4 workers, it's often necessary to rally all new workers onto food tasks. Now, I can't give you an exact magic number of workers for this, but when you start getting up to about 250 food while having a couple of workers queued, that's often the timing and the feeling that we rally the next workers onto carbon if we're going to rush, or onto Nova if we're going to fast tech level 3. The last 2 to 3 workers go on to Nova, often with the fast tech level 3, so that they can get us 200 Nova by the time we finish up our tech buildings to advanced when we're in T2. And as fast T3 is probably the most basic build in this game to do, the examples today will showcase that, and I suggest that you emulate that. I will cover rushing in depthly in another video, as it's difficult to do correctly if you can't do enough damage and you face a tech level player in T2, you'll potentially just outright lose the game without the correct decision making. Now, if we can keep these general ideas and guidelines in our head at all times, and watch these throughout the examples, we should get a good idea of how we should be approaching these food archetypes. Just a quick little sidebar here to state that we have a GBG Discord community that you can join off in the description. There you can hook up with fellow GBGers and play games on Voobly. You can also donate to the channel if you're appreciating the content and want to buy me a coffee. Now, without further ado, the following clips here are going to detail the food start archetypes with an example for each. I will put a timestamp into the description field listing each one for quick access. So this is a 4 nerf no food opening. So first things first, you want to grab those nerfs up, and as I've said, the general rule should really be that we just eat one of the nerfs at the start until we work out what food we need from the map, what's there provided for us. It's particularly when you're learning the game and you've not quite got all the mechanics fleshed out, it's really good just to keep the command center buzzing and building those workers. And of course I do the 1 house opener, then I build the second one. But as I said before, you could just do 2 houses at the start just to make things easier for yourselves. And we're going to go off and get on the carbon there. You can have 5 or 6 workers on the food. I would recommend 6. I should probably have 6 most of the time. But I'm always mucking about and playing around with things in terms of how many workers to do. But that should be the general rule, about 6 on food, 4 or 5 on carbon. I would say 4. So we find these extra nerfs, so we're just going to eat all of these nerfs, and our objective is to just get a carbon pool built up while we finish off the nerfs, and then we can just start farming. Got a slight little bit of an idle command center. It's probably because I didn't have 6 earlier. You can get basic training during the downtime. It's just something that you can always be doing if you've mucked things up, you've gotten yourself housed, or you don't have enough food. Get basic training just during that downtime. So getting the houses up, getting the carbon built up, and then we will look to get a food processor. Now, it's ideal to farm towards your carbon, because what you can do with your houses is you can make a sort of like a wall shape around each end of the carbon, and you can wrap your farms up in that as well. And that way you can keep them safer from enemy troops or anything that's trying to harass them. It's sort of you're creating a sort of little shell. We don't really go like fully nuts on the walls like people in Age of Empires do, simply because Mounties destroy walls so quickly and air flies over them. So in general, it's better to more set up just like good strategic defences with the buildings, but we don't necessarily need to always be fully walled. There are times when it's good, but in general you don't really want to like overwall like they would do in Age of Empires 2, because they get so much back from it, having that worker always building like little light walls and everywhere. So you can see we started to place down the farms here, and occasionally we have to do the little the food drop trick, just to get these guys to deposit the food, just so we can keep the command center going. Otherwise, if we let them go at their own rate, we would have so much downtime on the command center. You see we've almost got about 5 farms. And rebels get a little bit of a bonus there to their sort of worker carry rate with the farms. It makes them a lot more efficient. So in general they tend to need 1 less farm than the other civs. And from what I remember, like going T2, it was kind of you needed 12 farms or so. Or 13 farms, I think. 12 farms as rebels were the sort of guidelines that I was taught to play with. And when you want to go T3, you need a bit more, so you need up to about 15 to 16 farms just to get enough of a food surplus to get the 800 that's needed. You can see there's the workers getting stuck there when they're on the same tree. They bump against one another. That's something you can do with the carbon rocks. You can do a little light wall once you've mined them down, just to get rid of the carbon rocks. I've done that there just to open up the carbon. So typically when you have to do a lot of farming, you have a lot more workers on carbon. It's often, and you know, like the techs are a bit slower as well because you need to invest all this carbon to get your food. It's better to get a second carbon processor as well, just to keep the workers being efficient, just so they can all have their own tree, stop bumping. It really does pay off in the long run. So you can see our food's really building up now. We're almost at 400. So we're probably going to get 1 more farm and then we're going to think about maybe going on to the Nova. It's like with experience you can play about and pull workers off certain resource fields and tune it to be very efficient. But just this base knowledge should be enough to get you where you're going. Get you to T3 and get you playing the game properly. So probably going to hit T2 after this worker. We haven't got the basic training yet, but we can get that in T2. There's not really much to say during the downtime. There's only a few things I need to go and do after hitting T2. Just queue up some workers and place the tech buildings. And that's all there really is to it for a T3 build. Just a little bit of mucking around on the scout. Something you could be doing while you're waiting, because as you can see there's not really much maintenance required for the economy. The only thing that could really happen is like a farm runs out and you need to replace it. I would watch out for that house that you need when you go T3. Because normally you might be 24 out of 25 pop, or as here I was 28 out of 30. I am very prone to forgetting it, even with all my experience. I hit T3 and I want to build some workers and well, that's what happens. And this is what happens when you don't put the AI on moderate. It starts griefing you a little bit, but we should be fine. It's only 2 troopers. Buildings are almost up, and once they're up, it should work out about the same-ish sort of time here. And that's that one. So in this one, this will be a 5 Lure No Nerfs map. So pretty much just a lot of huntable animals and no nerfs that you need to put in an animal nursery or anything, so you'd have to play around that with the extra carbon. So very simply be as quick as you can, lure an animal over. So we can see the Ronto over there. We're going to be quick onto that. I'm going to grab him, shoot twice, then you run away. Try and get your guys to get some carbon while they're waiting, and then task them on just as it gets a bit closer to the command center, and it should die by about the time you get to the CC. That's fine. That's without, you don't need basic training if you do it correctly. But the times to maybe get basic training is if it's a really long distance you've got to take the Ronto, or if you're the Ronto's standing behind some carbon or something like that, because that can make the journey a lot longer, a lot harder on the pathfinding. And you see with this you'll have to do the food dropping technique as well. So you have to just grab the workers and just takes a little bit of game sense just to get it right, just to figure how much food they've got. you want to be sort of depositing when they've all got about 10 or so that you get 50 out of them, because they'll keep gathering until they reach their max capacity, which is like 35. So if you let them do that, you just end up with a crazy idle command center. So you can see we've got the 6 workers on food there. We're sending off our new workers onto carbon. And I'm maybe going to just go 3 just now, because I just want to lure the next Ronto. Little things like that are fairly acceptable. It's the general sort of split of the workers. So we're pulling him over. We just want to make sure that we don't have any idle time with our hunter boys. And there we go. Managed to get that off and not lose the worker. To build another house as well, just ahead of time. You can see that Ronto's just expired, but about the time that we brought that Ronto back. We still got some dewbacks that we can eat and some Eopies as well, so plenty of hunt on this map. So we know what we're going to be doing with our food ahead of time here. Now that we've got 4 on carbon, we're going to be putting all our new workers onto food here. So you can see those 2 are just waiting for this dewback, so we're getting a second lureable animal so we can get them wrapped around him as well. And start munching on his the flesh, fuel the R2-D2 colony. And there's not really much to do in these moments. Just sort of waiting. But we need to keep an eye on the food, on the Ronto, to see when it's about to expire so we can get another dewback over here. I think there's actually 6 lure on this map. That's even better now. Oh, some really horrible pathfinding there. The Eopies are trying their best to kill the R2-D2. Feel some workers start shooting at it. We need to garrison this guy as quick as possible before that dewback hones in on him. And what you can do, we see where workers are stranded on the other side, we can just garrison and then deposit them over. Quick movement around the command center. Grab that worker over there, get him started on a Nova processor. Just to make sure we got the building for the building rule, start getting that Nova in. I think we'll want a food processor as well here, just to grab up all those Eopies, just because there's a lot of them there. Because each one of those is worth about 140 food. That's really nice, so we want to start eating those, and we'll lure over the dewbacks as we need them as well. But the Eopie guys don't really need to have too much sort of babysitting. They'll just shoot them, kill them, eat them, and then move on to the next one. Whereas with the animals that sort of fight back, your guys don't automatically go on them. And look at that absolute griefing from the carbon workers there, that they've just managed to get stuck just because they're on the same trees. So again, what we talked about is just splitting your carbon workers up. You have to babysit them. They're absolutely shocking. So you can see our resources now. We've got a decent amount of carbon built up, and that carbon's all ours for if we want to spend it on tech buildings, or if you wanted to spend it on troop center or power core here. Simply because we don't need farms right now, so we don't need to invest it into our own food economy. But it's nicely built up while we're getting all the food that we needed to push the button there to go to D2. And again, not much to say when there's this sort of downtime. Just babysitting the workers. Maybe going to get them on the dewback soon. Hopefully that's enough though, just to get us off to T3. There's probably about 500 food there or so. We're going to build a couple of workers though while we build our tech buildings. Just got to work out where we want to place them. So I tend to go for the spaceport. The spaceport's very good. It's very versatile. And the mech factory is very safe as well. Mech factory lets you make mech destroyers, even if you don't intend to make strike mechs to harass. The mech destroyers are almost essential for defending yourself. And the spaceport gives you hollow nets, so you can keep an eye on your teammates. Very important if you're playing in the pocket role. You need to be able to see what's happening in your teammate's base so you can respond, react to it. And you can, sell stuff to get ore if you need it for an anti-air turret. And there we go. So that's the end of this one. So this one is going to be the high nerf, high lure archetype. So as you can see, you find the nerfs at the start there. You typically find about 8. It goes up to about 16 unusually. Sometimes there's 18. The other nerf variants can be up to about 8 or 10. And then you've got low nerf, which is up to 4. So we desperately want to be scouting around, trying to find the 2 groups of 4 nerfs that we still got to get. And all our workers are just on a carbon, so we can get a second animal nursery as soon as possible. And because we haven't found any extra food as well, and we haven't found a nerf, so we want to eat one of those nerfs right now. But I would suggest you just always eat one until you've got all the basics down. Because it's quite difficult for you to go off and get those Rontos that we've just found just now while you've got to build another nursery and stuff. And it's always very typical to be stuck on 8 nerfs for a while and not find your last 4. I can't actually tell if I've got 8 or 12 here. I think I only had 8, but I think I maybe found 4 up the top there on the left. So we're on about 12. There's still 4 nerfs to find. So you can see we're sending the worker over just to get the Ronto. We want to get the huntable animals as soon as possible. Just because they got the fastest gather rate in the game. And what we're going to do is we're just going to put all our workers on the hunt just now. And I think once that bantha's over, they'll all go into carbon. The scout is still desperately trying to find those last nerfs. Probably north. See, we're sort of looking around wondering where are they. So you can see we've got 100 carbon here. We've already built a house ahead of time as well, just to be safe. And as I said, you want to get right in the middle of the carbon lines there. And we're going to lure over another Ronto. We're going to have a lot of food very quickly. So with these types of starts, by the time you've got 500 food, you're probably going to have a lot less workers than you usually would on the other archetypes. That's why it's hard for me to give people build orders, just the general sort of rules. Just sort of shift clicking around there with the scout, making sure he's got something to do while we are off bashing these Rontos. And that's fine, you can always garrison them just to avoid an extra hit, save some of the HP, drop the aggro. And you can press W just to send the worker back to work. See, this one's going to end as well, so we're already off getting another dewback here. Then we'll want to eat those Eopies probably as well when we make a food processor. And you can see how our food's almost up at 400 already. Whereas we've only got about 18 workers. And very soon we should be able to get the Nova processor as well. So I've already calculated what we're doing once the Ronto and that dewback runs out. We're going to go eat those Eopies. And between them and all the nerfs that we've got in the nurseries, which are ticking away, giving us food, we should be good to have the 800 we require to get to T3. And we definitely need 3 on Nova here, just because we're going to get to T2 with so much food. We won't need to make too many workers. In Age of Empires, it's more about making sure you've got all the workers and you've got your economy set up and stuff, but the units that you can build in GBG are just so strong. The tech levels just mean so much. It's pretty much always very important just to get up there as soon as possible. It gives you so many more options in what you can do and how much you can punish your opponents as well if they fall behind in that regard. Fortunate little great dragon there hitting the worker that's got like no health from the luring of the animals. But some of the civs, like rebels, have got robot workers, and robot workers can repair one another. So not really in a rush to just start building the tech buildings right now, simply because I don't have enough for both of them. I kind of just build them at the same sort of time, just so we can be very efficient with the workers that we're building. Make sure we get as much workers out as we can while we need to build them. Even the scout getting attacked by Great Dragon there. See, the food's already there, the Nova's already there, so it's just about getting the buildings up now. So we're just going to throw all these workers onto them. And we're just waiting to click the button. And that's us. So in this one, it's going to be high nerf but no lure, which genuinely means generally means that we have to farm. But the nerfs are about enough to keep the command center going once you've got them all housed. So we're going to be looking around, try to grab the nerfs as quickly as possible, get them into the nurseries, build the second nursery as soon as possible as well. We're going to eat one just to be safe, since we've not found any obvious candidates for food. I'm still hunting around there. You can see I don't want to pull all my workers off carbon because I want the other nursery as well, but once that's placed down, we're probably just going to put the rest of the workers onto there. Desperately hunting around for these nerfs. We're going to need another house as well. It's easy to forget when you open one house levels. Since you're doing so much, that's why I don't recommend it to newer players. We've got all our nerfs now, we just need to get them in the nurseries. And then what we're going to look to do is get the carbon as soon as possible, I think. It'll be a bit different to when you normally farm. You've got to get the farms out first. We've already got enough food really to sustain our command center. So we're going to get the carbon all properly set up. And then we're just going to power place farms as we can. Nerfs go into the nursery. You might think, oh, those are banthas, but in general, just the term nerf is just for nerfs and banthas. They become even more relevant when you see what they've put in expanding fronts. There's all sorts of herdable animals. They'll be getting called nerfs as well. So we're going to need another house, and you can see we're going to have so many workers right now on carbon. So what we're going to want to do is build a second carbon processor as well, just to keep them really efficient. Give them each one tree, stop them bumping and getting confused, causing pile-ups. Not sure why I decided to get basic training there. I think maybe I thought it was housed or something. I think the worst part is that I'm not actually telling the command center to make any workers right now. I'm too busy mucking about with these trees. You see we're going to get the food processor now, so we've got a really, really good sensor or source of carbon set up now. And we're just going to power build the farms as we can. See, all new workers are going to build farms, and we're going to pull some that are just seem a little bit too saturated, maybe in the middle or on the edges of these carbon processors. Are going to make farms with them as well. You see, we can build these farms quite quickly because the carbon's just rolling in. Not much to say at this point. Just worker build, worker farm. And eventually, look at that guy getting stuck there between those two. It's just typical. But as you build up a bit more surplus of a carbon and you're not going to be housed, you can just pull another worker off carbon, make a farm with them. You can see our food's getting up to about that mark now. That's sort of 250, 300 food. That's when we go onto Nova. So it just tends to sort of work out that way. There's a sort of feel to it. If we had the same start of resources every game, you would get build orders, believe me. But here we got to work with the chaos of the random starts. And see how we're at 500 food now? There we go, hit T2. Perfect. We got 3 workers onto Nova. we're probably going to need a couple more farms, I would have thought. It's easy to overbuild farms when you've got nerfs as well, because they sometimes feel a bit tricky to just calculate. I would liken like 4 nerfs is about 1 worker on food. So if we've got 16, we've got about 4 there. And I think we've maybe got about like 11 or 12 farms. 11. So it's like we've got 15 farms, which is about what you need for T3 with Rebels. 16 for the other civs. That's just because Rebels got the extra gather rate. Right, we're going to place the tech buildings here while we just build some workers from the command center. Build another house there because I'm just terrible these days for getting myself housed. I'm always thinking about other things, mucking about. And you can see our resources there. It's going to hit about 200 Nova, hit about 800 food. Buildings are going to finish off. Then we're going to hit the button. That's us. Right, this one is going to be berries only, or well, food stockpile only. They're the same thing, same sort of gather rate. You need a food processor to gather from them, and there's a little rule that we need to implement with those is that we need 8 workers on berries or a food stockpile to keep the command center going. So Space Mass is probably the most obvious candidate for this, and it was the best way for me to find this to showcase it. It's pretty much tends to always work out. There's sometimes Minox as a huntable animal around, but in general it's kind of just you've got this food stockpile and that's about it for the food. And the most generic sort of strategy on this tends to be the rush using the transport, but won't be showcasing that. It'll be showcasing the more the sort of pocket-centric play here where you would be going T3. So you can see that all the workers are going to go on to the berries here. Just going to have to build our second house now. And he'll go off and join them. And again, we're trying to split them up a little bit, particularly early on here, because you know they do bump as well. It's the same as the carbon. Workers are just a nightmare for getting stuck. So you can see we've only got about 7, so the next one's going to go into there, and then we'll have 8, and that should be enough to just keep the command center going. You can see how we're on 40, we're just one shy a little bit right now. And that should be us. And then we're going to go into carbon, so we need to get a carbon processor set up, and then after we've gotten the carbon set up, we're going to have to go into farms as well to get the food required to get off to T2, just to build up that surplus. I don't really recommend anyone goes more than 8 on the berries because they'll run out too quickly, and you won't have the balance of carbon that you need to get farms. You just end up idles. So this bit's going to be a little bit slow. It's one of those maps that goes kind of slow. It's very hard to get big edges on your opponents and your teammates on this one because you've all just got the food stock there. There's very little room for error on it really. It's just pretty much you go on the food stockpile, the berries, and then you end up with about 5 or 6 farms, and you're off to T2. So we'll get the carbon. This map's an absolute nightmare for terrible looking carbons, and you can see there's always hills everywhere as well, which makes placing a command center in T3 a nightmare. But this one is in the standard map pool, which we do tend to play with. Do recommend people play. It adds a little bit of spice, but a lot of people just don't like it. I think mainly because it makes them feel uncomfortable. Particularly the transport that everyone starts with and the transport rushing strategy. I think we're going to have about 5 on carbon here in this instance. It's just because we don't have enough carbon to put these new workers on the farm, so we're just going to build them as they come. So if you don't have the carbon for someone to make a farm, they're just going to mine carbon until we do. And it's going to work out that it's mainly the new rotation of workers that are supplied by the stockpiles there are going to make a farm when they come out of the command center. One day this little guy will be able to make a farm when there's enough of a surplus of carbon. He might find himself making a house before that. You can see how the resources line up with the carbon, worker comes out, Place farm. And again. 60 carbon, place farm. Why does this worker keep walking back and forth? I'm definitely going to need that house. I think we're forgetting here. Too busy placing farms. These are the dangers of playing GBG. And you can see that I want to get another carbon processor as well. I think it's mainly because I'm getting annoyed at that worker that keeps walking back and forth. I get ourselves house because we weren't paying attention. See, our food's built up here. Now, you could skip the second carbon processor, but honestly, I've been enjoying it a lot. It feels good. It does feel very impactful to the amount of carb we get. Just to sort of limit the error of these guys just bouncing around and getting stuck. So we're going to be on 500 food now. So after the next worker, so we've got 3 on Nova. I think we'll just go at T2. Hit the button for that. Our house is built ahead of time. We should be fine now. You can see we've still got some food stockpiles to eat. But we're going to need some extra farms now as well. So what we're going to do is going to pull a couple of workers off of carbon, a couple off of the food stockpile, just so it doesn't run out too quickly. And make sure we've got enough workers bringing in the food so we can get to T3. I believe we pulled one off Nova there because I just don't think we'd have the food quick enough for when we would get 200 Nova there. We've probably got enough though. Seem to be hitting about 500 food already. Should build up quite quickly, particularly with rebels. So I'm now going to start building our tech buildings. Make factory spaceport. See, the Nova's almost there, the food's almost there. And these stockpiles are starting to run out now, but they'd probably be already done if we hadn't taken those 2 workers off. So they should run out about the time that we can click T3, and then we could just task those guys onto carbon. Because I don't think we really need them on farms just now. That'd be enough food. And we're going to hit the button. Have to hit twice, and that's us. So this is the most painful one, the no food start. This is the one that would really bamboozle you if you were a new player and you didn't really understand the early game mechanics too much. It's very hostile, just having no food, so you effectively have to build a food processor first, and you have to just start farming instantly. It can happen on like Desert, Geonosis, I think, Hoff here, which is showcasing it, I believe. It comes now and again, and it does add a bit of an interesting depth, but it's a very easy one to get wrong. So you can see we're just building farms as soon as we can. We're going to have like an idle command center for like a couple of minutes. It's just the way it is. And you will have to do a bit of food dropping as well, just to grab the farmers and get to the 50 total. You can see we can get 3 farms here. This is another instance of where I like having the one house start, because as you can see, we're 8 out of 10 population just now, and we can't even build a worker right now. So getting that extra farm quicker does help us in this instance. And we're just building them round the command center, around the food processor, try to keep it as efficient as possible. You can see where we're at 44 food there, we want to garrison and we want to queue up the worker. We don't want to wait. We've been waiting long enough. So with Rebels, you get about 5 farms, and then you get your carbon processor. Other civs, you can go about 6, just to be safe, really. And I don't know why there's workers just standing still there when they've got carbon to deposit. And so now we're going to have a little bit of a dicey building in the house there. We're 1 carbon off. Pain. Really annoying. Try to build that house as soon as possible. Garrison all these guys, get the worker queued. There we go. So now we're going to want to get the carbon processor. And to be honest, I might want to get 2 carbon processors and then get the next farms. I'm unsure where I stand on this, but I do really enjoy those extra carbon processors. There's going to be a lot of workers getting carbon anyway, just because we can only build so many farms at a time. I think we can build workers a little bit quicker than we can build farms right now. But we're just keeping an eye on the food total, keeping an eye where we are in the worker cycle. We've got about enough there to get a carbon processor, so we're going to garrison. They're all going to deposit their held resources, the carbon they've got, and then we're going to go build the carbon processor. Build a new house as well. You can see we're probably going to end up with like 8 or 9 workers on carbon just now. Because we can't build those 2 farms because they've gone into a carbon processor. Try to keep the workers right. Drop off the food. Build a new worker. And I believe we're looking at, I think we'll just get another carbon processor now, and then we'll just fire out all the farms we need. Just because these guys are looking a little bit inefficient. So you want to build it a little bit away from the other one, just to make sure that they maybe got like 4 trees each around them, and not like overlapping. Because if they're overlapping, you're losing like efficiency there. Or your maximum potential efficiency, I suppose. And now we're just going to build farms. Just going to pull a couple guys off as well. Off of the carbon there. Put them on 2 farms. Still having to do a bit of food dropping now and again, just typical. But if you want to avoid that, you could delay the second carbon processor and just get those 2 farms earlier. If you find that too much of a struggle. But I really like this for the amount of carbon I'm going to end up with. Just look at them. They're all happy mining down those trees. The happy R2D2 shuffle. You can see how we build the farms around the command center, around the food processor, just to make it as efficient as possible. And as always, we want to farm towards the carbon so that when we build houses around it, we're sort of safe. You can see we sort of got vision all the way around with the houses. This is hitting about 250 food or so now. We have to rebuild some farms, that's just fine, that's just the way it works. Things take so long. It's annoyingly just sort of happening about the same time we get a carbon or a Nova processor. Just waiting for the lads to put the carbon in. And we're going to hit the button, T2. Off we go. We'll probably want 1 or 2 more farms, I think. I think we actually might have 15 farms, that might be okay. 16, well that's more than enough, should be fine. See, the food's actually going up really quickly. Farming is good. So the only thing that's going to be holding us back a little bit here is just the carbon, but it will come through. I'm going to build a couple of workers, rally them off to build the tech buildings. We don't want to pull the workers off carbon because we want them to just focus on getting the carbon. So I'm just going to pull this guy off. I'll put this guy off the Nova because we're at about 200 there. You can just go and help out in the carbon just now. New building. And we're just building one worker as we can. Just going to wait for that building. Because we've got the food there, we're just going to upgrade the carbon. So that's us, and that'll be the end of this. So I hope everyone's enjoyed the video, and I will look to do more educational tutorials on GBG, and what we can do, I'll look into more in-depth things like the sort of rules in the team game, and we'll look into rushing, and then we'll talk about some things in the late games. There's some sort of abstract topics that I can't really get into details when we do the sort of commentary of the games, but we'll still do commentary of games as well. And as always, if you look in the description, you'll find the links to the Small Trees mod that we mentioned earlier. You'll find a link to the GBG Discord, you'll find a link to Voobly where you can play this game online, and you'll find a link there if you want to donate and buy me a coffee if you want to do something a little extra. So as always, I'll see you guys in the next video, and please leave a like, a comment, to subscribe to the channel if you're not, just to help the channel out in the algorithm, get more people seeing it, join in the GBG Discord, and hopefully playing the game with us there on Voobly. Goodbye.